Live from ND Studios, Notre Dame, Indiana, this is the Rhythms of Faith podcast. Welcome to Rhythms of Faith. We're thrilled to be joined today by Dr. Joris Geldhof, who's a professor of theology here at the University of Notre Dame. Joris, welcome to Rhythms of Faith.
Thank you very much.
Joris, you just got here to Notre Dame, so welcome. We're thrilled to have you here. Can you tell us what makes you passionate about studying liturgy?
Oh, so many things. I think that liturgy is really the field of study in theology and maybe also more broadly the humanities where everything comes together. There is the beauty, there is the truth, there is the goodness, there is scripture, there is systematic questions, there is a long history, there is real connection with how human beings behave. So there is a lot of anthropology, which then immediately reaches out to so many disciplines, from psychology to history. And I think that's what made me like it.
Mhm.
And also that it is through all these many things that God is worshipped in a way almost miraculously. Because it's not an abstract thing. It's something very, very real and very concrete. Yet God is as transcendent as one would think in all kinds of philosophies. But in liturgy, that itself becomes a concretely lived reality. So I think that is what makes me passionate about the study of liturgy. And the liturgy itself also makes me feel at home in a way, and warm and belonging to something that goes way beyond the limits of my own existence.
Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you.
In our class, Rhythms of Faith, we read your article, the Deesis on Van Eyck's Ghent Altarpiece and its potential for liturgical theology today, in which you make a case for the idea that one of the things it means to be a piece of liturgical art is for the art to be timeless. What do you mean by that? What makes a piece of art timeless?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and I thank you very much for reading that article. No, I mean two things. The first, timeless means for me iconic, in the sense that it is like an icon. And to understand an icon is not to understand a painting. So an icon, in a way, looks at us. In a painting, we look at the painting. But in an icon, you will never really understand unless you realize that you're being taken up by what the icon actually depicts. And it always has subtle elements that invite you into contemplating what it's really about. And that can be done, I think, in any time. That can be done at any time. So I think timelessness for me means something like iconic. And secondly, and the two are related, of course, by timelessness, I mean a certain independence of a context, both the context of origin of the individual piece of art, which in our case is the 15th century, somewhere in Flanders, probably Ghent. But the whole meaning of what you see on the polyptych is largely independent from that particular context of origin. Yet it is also independent of the context in which we would go and look at the painting or study it or discuss about it. So there is a certain independence of context. And by these two features, so to speak, an iconic element and a context-independent aspect, I would add also a kind of critical observation, because I think we tend, in liturgical studies, in liturgical theology, we're children of our time, of course, but that also means that we tend to look too much to the immediate context, and that we tend to interpret almost everything with, at the back of our minds, where does this person now speak from? What does this text originally meant? And we somehow assume that by doing that we will find the meaning. And I think that great pieces of art whether it be in text or in sound or through whatever material means, invites us actually to liberate us in a way from looking so closely at one time. So I think that this critical observation would also be important for me. That we should not only look at our own time, the time in which we live, but also beyond our time and times.
So one of the reasons we have them read this in this class is, I think, and just to kind of elaborate on what you've said or to draw some connections, I think people tend to think of the timelessness of liturgical art as a matter of its style, of it being, a certain age or done in a certain way. And one of the things we want them to do is see that the timelessness of liturgical art is something that's deeper than its style.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, so I really like what you've said here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think also that in even in abstract art and in some forms of contemporary art, you can discern the timelessness of what it really means and what it really conveys. However, it is also important to do justice to the reception of a work of art. I think not every piece of art is as widely received, and there is always historical contingencies involved. But yet, there are these great pieces of art, these that have something monumental to them, that have spoken to many different cultures and times, that also reveal something in and of themselves.
Can you tell us a little bit about the Ghent Altarpiece? Like why is it significant, or maybe more interestingly, like what made you love it enough to write about it?
Oh, there is a certain conviction that I have. It simply says less is more. And when I study pieces of art, and I'm a dilettante, I mean, I didn't study the history of art or whatever. I tend to focus on some of these great pieces. Another one that I've studied a little bit was the Maestà by Duccio di Boninsegna, also another famous piece of art in Siena. So what makes me study this is of course a personal connection that I have. I live in Ghent. I've been privileged to go and watch it with many of the visitors that I welcome in Ghent. I try to speak about it. I love to speak about it. I try when people come to make it possible that they go and see the piece of art. And what I try to give them is something far beyond a kind of general tourist interest in the piece of art, because given that timelessness, I think that it really speaks to us, and I try to put into some words when I stand there in front of it and say what I like about them, what I think that the connection between the different elements is. It tells a whole story. It tells the story of salvation.
Mm-hmm.
So whereas historians of art would praise its technical quality, would shed light on the workshop of the Van Eyck brothers, would also tell these stories that I call, it says more the interest of a journalist, that one of the panels was stolen. It has not yet been found again.
Mm-hmm.
And there is all kinds of theories of what happened. But all of that is actually very nice and interesting in a way for tourists, but it doesn't really get to the core of it. And the closest that in my reviewing some of the literature that exists about it, the closest that art historians would come to the theological interpretation of the work is saying that it is a unique or a strange combination of different elements. And what I try to do is, well, that may not be untrue, but there is a coherence. There is a deep sense on why all these different panels depict what they depict and in the way in which they do it. And then you can start seeing so many connections. And I'm still surprised every time that I see it. And my experience here would be close to something like a great symphony. So the First Symphony of Brahms, for instance, one of my favorites. I can listen to it time and again, and I would always be surprised by a new aspect of the interpretation of the performance that I never had heard before. And so I think that these monumental pieces of art have a potential of surprising you time and again. So they're not made to be digested just once and then say, I've seen it, check the box. No, they continue to actually question you and even interrogate you. Where do you now stand?
So what's distinctive about liturgical art versus non-liturgical art? Could I use the same framework that you applied to the Ghent Altarpiece to Brahms First Symphony, for example? And then maybe a second question that could be related would be, well, maybe just the first one I think would be good. Yeah.
Well, I think so, yes, but it would be more of a stretch. It would require some more heuristic and hermeneutical fieldwork, so to speak, to connect Brahms's First Symphony to the liturgy. I work in the article with the concept, I think, of liturgical reality. So which is also an allusion to, although I don't elaborate it in the text, but that is an allusion to what Congar develops in the sense of the res. So there is, through a manifold of sacramental science, the sacramentum tantum, always a relation, there should always be a relation to the res. And if that becomes too far from one another, then the work that you need to do to show how the sacramentum tantum refers to the res becomes more difficult, becomes more challenging. So I would apply that schema to in the response to your question. The sacramentum tantum of Brahms itself would be a little bit farther away from the res, but it is still related. And that's another thing that I like about liturgical theology. Nothing is irrelevant. Everything that is part of our life world, at whatever level, in whatever culture, through whatever means and language, all of it is relevant. And that is because the whole world, the whole history is there to be sanctified by God's initiative of redemption, salvation, and love that we can participate in. Everything. So also Brahms's symphony.
It can be a vehicle for that as well.
Yeah.
The res is like, I was wondering if you could put that, and you were so close to there already, in the framework of what you were saying at the beginning about the way that all of the facets of the humanities and of, the intellectual life generally, and the transcendental realities can be seen in liturgical art. Like, can you expand on that for the Ghent Altarpiece a little bit? Like, where should our students be looking for the intersection of truth, beauty, and the good, and the anthropology and history, and this is like your chance to give a long distance tour of the Ghent Altarpiece for our visitors that have never been there.
Well, I brought something with me.
Oh, great!
Which is the Ghent Altarpiece in a way.
Wonderful.
And I think the first element is that it is closed, that it was normally closed, and that only on feast days it was opened. So I think that is the first very important aspect. When you now go and look at it, it's always like this. I've heard that they would actually try to make it possible that it will open and close again with the restoration that will be finished in 27. And I very much endorse that idea. But what immediately strikes one is the kind of dominance of white and gray colors here, and then an abundance of red, green, and blue when the polyptych is opened. So I think that a certain,
Can I put that up?
of course,
This.
a certain mysticism of the colors, and there is profound reasons of what I mean. Van Eyck was probably assisted by some contemporary theologians, and one possibility, we don't know exactly who they were, but it is not impossible that some of them had recently been involved also in the university in Leuven, which was founded around exactly the same time. But the central part of the closed altarpiece is an Annunciation scene. And that's, of course, to be interpreted mystagogically as a first communion, because Mary was the first one to receive the body of Christ in her own body. And when the polyptych is opened, you see actually the full scope of what that Eucharist actually is, and how it all coheres, how it relates to the religious life, how it relates to the so-called secular life, how it draws everyone to the altar, and then how there is actually also a vertical move to the dioceses, where you have then Mary and Saint John the Baptist. Saint John the Baptist is another possible entry into the entire piece, and that has to do with the context of origin, because the church for which this was made was originally not the Cathedral of Saint Bavo in Ghent, but it was, can you imagine? It was meant to be just a parish church. Really.
Talking about under promise and over deliver.
And it was, and the crypt of the where there are still services, for instance, for the prayer for Christian unity, there are still services there. The crypt is still dedicated to Saint John. So, and it's actually the two Saint Johns, Saint John the Baptist and Saint John the Evangelist, and those are exactly the ones you find here. So and then the other two persons, well, it's Renaissance art. They are the one who sponsored, paid for the whole thing. But it is also indicative that they actually want to put themselves literally together with the saints under the mysteries to be celebrated, and that is a logic that you will find in a lot of church architecture. That the community of faith who gathers puts itself in conjunction with the communion of saints to celebrate the mysteries. I mean, something celebrate you can see here in the basilica. There is the stained glass with all the saints, and then on top of that you find mysteries of faith. So and you find that also in Byzantine churches. And there's probably has been a connection between the Byzantine art icons and the Van Eyck brothers when they started this whole piece. So these are just a couple of first elements, and of course the colors then red, blue, and green. Green is the color of hope, blue is the color of faith, and red is the color of love. And that's exactly represented in those three figures of the deities. So the theological virtues, and love is the highest in a way. They're all high, but the really highest, that is love. That's red, that's in the center. And then you have hope, the figure of Saint John the Baptist, and faith, the figure of Our Lady. So there is so much beauty, and that is then also reflected if you look carefully at the composition also of the Old Testament prophets that you see on the lower level of the panel. And there is so much detail that to say, which you would actually miss if you just go and look at it as a tourist, and for 5 minutes look at the sheer splendor of what is exposed to you.
I'm interested a little bit in the cultural context, not just so that we can understand the piece better, but so that we could understand the conditions which would have led to something like this being able to get made. You know, like if you think about a parish church in South Bend, Indiana, for example, if someone proposed making this for that church or something like it, firstly, like the skills that would be required are cultivated over generations, of course, but also like the context in which the assembly or the congregation could receive something like this and lift it up as something to be honored and worshipped with, I think are very interesting questions. So like how, what can this cultural context teach us about what could enable things like this to be created today?
Well, there is not much that we actually know with certainty about the commission, about how the Van Eyck brothers, who did what, for instance. What did Hubert do and what did Jan do? We don't know. There is also some speculations about why this couple actually commissioned the work of art. They probably were childless, and there is some speculations about Veit, that's the man, why he felt some guilt and that he wanted to have a daily mass supported by this piece of art in a side chapel, because it was meant for a side chapel in this in the building of the Gothic cathedral. By the way, Veit not only paid for the piece of art, but also for the chapel itself. So, and Ghent was at the time a very wealthy city. So, but what I find interesting, and that's maybe also part of the response to your question, what I find interesting is that Van Eyck clearly meant to create a piece of art, so to speak, for eternity. He used the best possible materials that were available, and he even experimented. And that is, it's between the Middle Ages and the Renaissance in a way, in terms of mentality. The experimentation with how we could make the hardest paint, and how that paint could almost stick perfectly to the layers between the wooden panel and then what you actually see. He experimented with all these things. Like future painters would also do that, and many painters have actually a fascination for the matter that they work with.
Sure.
That wasn't different with Van Eyck, but clearly he wanted this to of course he didn't know, well, in 500 years people must see this, but the fact that he would only select the best of the best for this work means something. I think it is a kind of tribute to God and the community, because immediately the people that much we know, immediately the people were immediately fond of it. They loved it. They cherished it. They wanted to be theirs. They connected with it. So that I think is also an important sign. If you transpose now all these elements to the contemporary context, well, in preparations for a class that I will teach this afternoon, I came across the word, the blasphemy of ugliness, in much liturgical art in the US. They're talking about the 1930s. But clearly at the time, there was not that awareness that we need the best of the best in order to have something beautiful in our spaces of worship. So
yeah,
maybe that can help us think about what's it really worth, also in terms of financial value. Is this really the most important thing?
Well, I'm really curious I've been thinking about this question a lot lately, is like the relationship between the artist and the economy, right? Like this is patronage, right? Like a wealthy individual funded this and funded the experimentation and the materials at the highest level. But can you really, maybe you can't answer this question, but can an artist's work ever really be quantified through an economic model? And what would that tell us about the nature of liturgical art, for example, or how we even get to a mentality that could allow us to create things in a current system that is so thoroughly quantified?
Yeah, I think I don't know what would be the best possible answer to your question, but what I do know is that our contemporary expectations of what an artist is and does and act and should produce is very romanticized.
Mm.
Um, and I mean, that clearly wasn't the case in Van Eyck's time. I mean, he had an artist workshop, yes, a very famous one, a good one. But in addition to being an artist, he was, for instance, also a diplomat. So he worked for the dynasty that at the time was ruling the great parts of the Low Country, the Dukes of Burgundy. I mean, and he could travel a lot. He traveled to Italy. That's what we know, where he received many impressions from the Renaissance art there, which has clearly also influenced his own work. He had seen many of these works with his own eyes. So, in other words, an artist as a kind of profession among other professions, that is a very recent idea in the history of Western culture. An artist was also many more things. I mean, we have idealized ideas about artists like Beethoven and Van Gogh as geniuses and so. But
and there was also an expectation that everybody would do art. You know, I mean, not everybody would produce the Ghent Altarpiece, but
no. But I think he'd be touching indeed on the importance of a broad layer in the society of craftsmanship and respect for that. You would also produce a unique piece of art. I mean, this clearly wasn't made to have then thousands of prints.
Right.
So now we do that, and that has many advantages.
Right, but they're not, I mean, I'm looking at a picture of a physical object. Like, it's very, very, there's a lot of distance between these things.
Yeah. I've seen the Ghent Altarpiece just once. And it was before, I read this essay, because it was, back when I was in Leuven the first time, we went to Ghent, and it's, as you say, like, it's overwhelming, and then it's inexhaustible, right? And that's, I feel like that's what you're getting at too, with this, like, idea of, like, there's something more about the thing than what it took to make it, even though also, like, it couldn't be made without all the economic and technological elements. But then somehow what's mysterious about it, what's timeless, if you will, is that there's something more there than, and that's what I like about this article, actually, is like it's very emphatic about, like, not reducing liturgical art to one measure, whether that's style or whether it's context or history or,
Is the fact that there's more there kind of emblematic of its sacramental nature?
Maybe. So I think the fact that there's more there is why there are so many people that find the piece to be sacramental in some sense from a lot of different perspectives. So, like, why it can be just as entrancing for an art historian or a theologian or a painter or, or somebody who's going to mass in the little chapel. But I also think, that, and I guess this is one of the questions that we wanted to ask you, is, like, I also think that things don't have to be, not everything that's timeless is sacramental, and not everything that's sacramental is timeless. Some things just work, and they just work today, and they might not work tomorrow.
You would always need to do the labor of discernment.
Yeah.
And to refine your hermeneutical tools to approach any piece of art in order for you to conclude that it is sacramental and that it can contribute to, as I argue with the Ghent Altarpiece, that it contributes to challenges for liturgical theology today. And another reason why this reference to the Ghent Altarpiece, I think, is meaningful, is that it is in a very healthy and liberating way also pre-modern. And what I mean by that is that modernity has a tendency to separate different atmospheres of life. And the economy, that's clearly not art. But and it's not politics, and it's not church, and all these separations. And that has created many good things. I'm certainly not against modernity, but there is also something liberating about a pre-modern attitude to reality as a whole. I mean, Van Eyck would certainly not be against trade and commerce and the economy, because how else could he have the best possible materials available? I mean, the stones of which they make blue lapis lazuli, I think, we don't have that in Flanders. That needs to come from elsewhere. Also, the red tints, but what you need for that needs to come from elsewhere. Of course, we have chicken and eggs that was available, but there is so many things that to produce it that for which you would actually need a whole network of trade and connections. So that also in an interesting way challenges our own presuppositions that art for the sake of art. That's actually for the most part of our history, that's a very strange concept.
Yeah, everything is for everything.
Yeah.
In the pre-modern world. Yeah.
Yes.
It's all, the economy exists so that you can make a piece of religious art, and you know, penance exists so that you can donate a lot of money and feel guilty so that you can make a piece of art.
If at all that is true.
Well, yeah, the point is the interconnection of things.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah.
That's the
point. What are some of these challenges / big questions that are facing liturgical theology today, in your estimation?
Ooh, I didn't see that one coming. But
I hope I can stump you once.
No, there is challenges, of course. Well, for better or for worse, I'd make a distinction here, ad intra and ad extra. And challenges ad intra for liturgical theologians who work in an academic context is, of course, methodological. Because liturgical theologians believe that the liturgical reality about which it all is, so the res is in a way primary to the way in which we think about it. So, and that there is this lex orandi that prevails over a lex credendi. There is not just a correspondence, but a kind of asymmetrical relationship. Yet, as deep as the conviction of liturgical theologians is about the truth of that axiom, as difficult is it to make that clear to our colleagues in academic theology. And by the way, it's even difficult to explain that or to draw consequences from that in some conversations that theologians have with leaders of the churches.
You don't say.
Strange as it may seem, they seem also not always convinced of that primordiality of worship over the doctrinal system. So that is a challenge ad intra. A challenge ad extra has, of course, to do with the times in which we live. How can you make sense of liturgy as the real politics of the church? You would immediately come into tensions with many other ideas about politics. And I think let me just shed light on this one idea that in this stage of my life is actually a kind of passion for me. A big liturgy is so often, and I'm tired of looking at it that way, is so often treated and considered to be the victim of certain mechanisms. It's the victim of developments of the church. It is the victim of secular culture. It is the victim of political ideologies. Yet there seem, even among the crowd of liturgical theologians, there seems to be some victimism.
Hmm.
And I think that is not liberating.
Mm-hmm.
If there is a lot of truth in these analyses, how liturgy was indeed the object of powers, and that it suffered from it. I think most of it, I would say, is true. But there is another dimension that liturgy itself also questions the way in which we do things, the way in which we think about things. So I would actually, instead of confirming the Calimero feeling about liturgy and its position, I would like to say, well, here is the most powerful questioning that you can imagine of the economy, of politics, of agriculture, of art, of, all the different aspects of reality. And to try to I try to take up in my own work now that challenge.
Mm-hmm.
So how can liturgy be an engine
Right.
of positive, constructive criticism of the society, the culture, the economy, the education, and so forth.
Yeah, that's an awesome thought.
There's
Go ahead.
a confidence in that really, because when you were talking about the trouble we have ad intra about thinking about the priority of what we do over all the dimensions that inform it, or are informed by it, I was thinking, like, people don't want to hear that because they're afraid that you're going to do it wrong. Fundamentally, they don't want you to, they're just terrified that we're going to do something wrong.
Yeah. That is, as academics, we always have to do our homework properly.
Mm-hmm.
And if we need the expertise of a sociologist, well, then we need to use everything that a sociologist has available for us to use it and better.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that's intrinsic to the work and the labor even that we're supposed to do.
Mm.
Joris, would you answer one of the questions that we challenge our students with for their final paper? And that is, what is liturgical participation?
Mm-hmm. I think that liturgical participation has to be understood from the perspective of mystery, and not as in some kind of activist way. It would prompt you to do some things, to also to action in and beyond liturgy, from the altar to the streets, as Bill Kavanaugh says, for sure. But I think that the deepest, almost contemplative value of active participation is actually a sense that you are being taken up into God's mystery of love, as shown in the Son, and that is made possible through the unifying force that we call Holy Spirit. Mm-hmm. So, and the Holy Spirit is also the guarantee that we're not wrong about that. So, because we do it in the unity of the Holy Spirit. So, liturgical participation is much more a profound theological truth than that it is a pastoral program. It has to be a pastoral program too, but that is not its deepest layer.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, we're going to end with the question we ask all of our guests at the end, which is, if you were an animal, what animal would you be?
It's good that I had that question beforehand. I mean, in my youth, many people and my family included would compare me with a bear. And I think there is some truth in it. I like to be alone on myself. I am kind, but you should not provoke me too much. Or another animal would be an ox that would have the similar qualities. But beyond that, I actually would like to be a whale, as in a movie that I really like, Whale Rider.
Oh,
I'd like to be that whale. So a whale is also on its own in the ocean, looking for depth. I mean, spending most of their life in the deep, and they have some quiet among them, and something that human beings, I think, find generally attractive and a little bit mysterious. So you can choose a bear, an ox, or a whale.
All right.
Who's a whale?
Yeah.
And long may you sing in the depths of liturgy. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been really a pleasure having this conversation with you. And we also want to thank those who are joining us for coming to the Rhythms of Faith podcast.